He'll talk, Chris will talk, and then it goes to Dave the next week.
Okay, so I'm not seeing if I can remember this.
Hello? Hello, everyone. Can this go a little bit louder? Or does that sound all right? Can you? Okay, Sean can hear me. My name is Larry Halbert. I represent the Sidney Historical Association. We're obviously here to celebrate Scintilla's 100th anniversary. And we will be learning a lot today. The Sidney Historical Association thanks the Community Cultural Center, Tracy Marcellus, and everyone, and the staff for hosting this. Especially, I'd like to thank Doug Barnard. If you look around, we could call him our IT man, equipment man, whatever, jack of all trades. But look at the environment here. All those curtains, I believe, were not here before. We had to block the sunlight out to make sure that this screen is going to project these pictures as best possible. Doug even took this white screen, he took it home and washed it. So there's nothing that he didn't do. I forgot the water this afternoon, and Doug went and got that too. And I guess the theme of today is, like for Doug, is, do I have to do everything? Well, Doug has done a lot. So I do ask that, I don't know if you paid attention, but the exits, you have to kind of know where they are. But I do ask that you please mute your cell phones. We don't want to hear, it's the thing that we probably don't think about that often. Please mute your cell phones. The collection box is over here, and that's for just operating expenses for the Community Cultural Center. And one of the things that I want to do, which is I love doing before any event, is I want to say, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
A little bit about the Community Cultural Center. I'm not exactly sure when this was actually called the Community Cultural Center. Can someone tell me that? About 5 years ago. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Tracy. There are cards over here, and there's water over here. The cards are for the Community Cultural Center, and it kind of tells a little bit about it. I'm not going to go through this card, but anyway, they're a 501c3. All donations are tax deductible. So let's proceed. In 1925, the Scintilla Magneto Company, the predecessor firm of the present Amphenol Aerospace Operations, came to town and began building a revolutionary new type of aircraft magneto that had already gained prominence for the superiority of the spark needed to ignite a mixture of air and gasoline in reciprocating aircraft engines. Is Pat McGowan here? I do not see him. I just wanted to thank him for his support. We welcome all of the guests that are here. I'm not going to go through all the names, but thank you so much for coming. Now I'd like to introduce Chris Capello. Chris Capello moved to Sidney in 1987 Graduated from Sidney High in 1990. After college, he joined the U.S. Navy, where he was a journalist and broadcaster for 9 years. He left the Navy in 2003 and began his career with Amphenol, where he's now the Director of Marketing Communications. Chris is, and he'll tell you this, he is in the final stages of completing a new book about Scintilla's 100th anniversary, connecting history from Scintilla to Amphenol, 100 years of enabling technology in Sidney, New York. Let's please welcome Chris Capello.
Thank you, Larry. I had this crazy idea at Amphenol a couple of years ago when I looked at an old issue of the Scintillator and saw that it was Scintilla came here in 1925. I thought, wow, 2025 is going to be 100 years. We should probably write a book about that. I did not realize how much work that would be, but it's been fun. So the last couple of years, I've been free time, on weekends and at nights, and maybe a little bit at work, but don't quote me on that. I've been working on an updated version of the 100-year history of Scintilla moving to Sidney, its relationship with the community, and just how this company decided to move here and has not only survived here, but thrived here. And it's, I think, an incredible story. And it's something that I'm very happy to share with you, and it'll be out this summer. Some of you actually who are in this room actually have chapters in it. So if anyone read the old Spark in the Dark book from 1990, it was mostly consisted of individual contributed chapters. And we're still going to have that in this new version of the book. But we're going to do what I assume will be the definitive history of the last 100 years here. I'm hoping that you guys will like it, and especially like the contributor chapters. They're a lot of fun too. They really add color to the history of this place. So just a quick perspective before Dave comes up and talk about this. You know, he's going to talk about the history of this place, especially the early history. But one of the things I just wanted to let people know about is the current state of Amphenol and where we stand as far as just in this industry, right? So Amphenol Corporation, we are one of 140 businesses around the world. So it's expanded greatly over the years. And this past year, we, I think, are over $15 billion in sales and are now the biggest connector manufacturer in the world, which is pretty incredible. In addition, the Amphenol group, that's just military and aerospace, is the largest in the world as well. I've had the good fortune of traveling to many of the different Amphenol businesses, not only in this country, but around the world, and attending different events and speaking with customers. And while things have changed and evolved, and there's some businesses that are much bigger than Amphenol here in Sidney now in 2025, I can definitively tell you that there may be no place more popular and more well-known in the entire industry of military and aerospace than Sidney, New York, and Amphenol Aerospace. It is still that well-known around the industry, so you should be very proud of it. And so this is a chance now at the 100th anniversary coming up to celebrate that history, and I think hopefully remind ourselves and this community of how important that relationship has been between the town and the company. Sure, the company had a lot to do with it, but I think the community, the people here, and how they not only helped this place survive and thrive through things like, you know, economic downturns and world wars and natural disasters. I'm sure I don't need to remind you. And yet it's still here, and the people still have that fighting spirit to make it happen here is just incredible. And so without further ado, I'll have Larry come back up, and then we'll hear a little bit about the early history. Thank you very much. And, oh, wait, one more thing. Sorry, I forgot. Probably the most important thing for what I'm up here for. In July 18th and 19th, we are going to have a 100th anniversary celebration at Amphenol Aerospace. And so it's Saturday, July 19th. You are all invited, the public, to come and help us celebrate. We'll have an open house, we'll have activities, we'll have tours, displays, exhibits, so on and so forth. We'd really love to see you all there because you don't get to celebrate a 100th anniversary very often. So we look forward to seeing everyone there too. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. So I just wanted to kind of read a little bit of the flavor of what Sidney life was like in the 50s and 60s. And it does pertain to Scintilla Bendix Corporation. After World War II, Sidney was on a prosperous path, mainly due to the Scintilla Bendix Corporation. The GI Bill promised education and home loans, allowing many veterans to buy houses and start families as the ideal of the American dream. As the 1950s arrived, Sidney began to undergo significant physical and social transformations. During these decades, new businesses, diners, and drive-ins, such as the Unadilla Drive-In, we all went there, didn't we? Established in 1956, were built, and television became a household item. These changes profoundly impacted daily life. Families gathered around their new televisions to watch programs and new broadcasts, which helped bring them closer together. Community events and activities at venues like the Recreation Center, Sidney Pool, and local baseball fields, on, became our charming little village. In the summer, children played outside from early morning until the streetlights came on, enjoying an innocence that flourished in an era that treasured open spaces and neighborly friendships. It was basically a safe environment for everyone. Local churches continued to be a community cornerstone, essential in fostering family connections. They provided a place for worship and served as community centers where people of all backgrounds could mingle and connect with one another. Sidney thrived with a bustling Main Street. We remember that. It was undoubtedly a safe, beautiful, and educationally enriching place that prepared kids for their future. And we owe this to our parents, our friends, our educators, and neighbors. It felt like everyone knew someone who worked at Scintilla Bendix. By 1960, Sidney's population had grown to over 7,000. There was no better time for families, kids, and parents alike to experience the village of Sidney. Now, I would like to introduce Dave Plummer. Hey, Dave, you probably didn't realize you were this popular. It's what a wonderful gathering we have. I'm just going to read a short bio. Dave, after high school, had aspirations of becoming a doctor. Through Cornell University Medical College, but lack of funding became an obstacle. Dave also wanted to join the U.S. Navy, but his dad had other ideas, so he decided to get his associate's degree at Erie County Technical School in mechanical technology. Dave worked in the manufacturing engineering department of Bendix Scintilla, now Amphenol, from April 1959 until his retirement in March 1997. His tenure there included several management positions, starting with 4 years in the process engineering group. He advanced through 18 years as assistant of the manager of manufacturing engineering, followed by promotion to supervisor of process engineering for 9 years. Before the 1980s, Dave talks about they worked with slide rules and adding machines because personal computers, as we know them today, were not yet available. Dave and his wife, Mary Jane, have enjoyed giving back to the Sidney community, where they have both lived and worked for over 65 years. And one last significant milestone, Dave celebrated his 90th birthday on February 6th, this past February 6th. Let's welcome Dave Plummer.
I said, thank you, Mary.
Oh, you're very welcome. I couldn't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay, that's good. Well, as you get on, at 90 years old, some things fail. One of them, your voice. This is the second thing to go. I can't remember what the first one. So I had a lot of fun in the last year putting this slideshow together. I have about 167 slides here, slide pictures. We work together very well, and I can only go as far as I know. I can't go into Amphenol because I didn't work for Amphenol that long. I worked from, I was the 34th year of Scintilla until 1997. So I can only show what I have, and I'm very much interested in just showing, giving you honest appraisals of the things that I know. It's not perfect. It's very hard to be perfect. I know that one of the things that Chris said that distracted me a little bit, but caught my mind, was that he was dead on when he said that there were so many companies that existed even 50, 60, 100 years ago that don't exist anymore. One of the reasons they don't is because they didn't keep up with the times. They didn't keep up with their processes. They didn't keep up with their products. That was not the way Scintilla operates. Right from the beginning, there are some keynotes, and I'm going to point them out, that have made Scintilla through Amphenol very, very prominent and very unique. So without any further chatter, start, we all remember this article that came out in May 1951 issue of Saturday Evening Post, and really put us on the map. These two gentlemen right here, I'm getting used to my instruments. This man right here, John Bryan, the tool room superintendent, when I arrived, he and his brothers came from Binghamton. They were real gentlemen. John was one of the best fellows that I ever worked with. The guy next to him was Bernie White. He was a Swiss. He was a very good friend of Herman Keller, and he was probably one of the earliest ones who will be continuing along. There's a bird's eye, eagle's eye view of the old Queen before she was taken from us in 2018. The distance from, oops, the distance from the door to the tool room, where some of you work, to the door of the west end, down that south aisle is 1/4 of a mile. You didn't want to be in that aisle at 3:30, 60 years ago, because it was like the running of the bulls. I just had to stand aside for 10 minutes and wait for people to go through. There are 15 acres of roof. I was a capital equipment coordinator for many years, and what we had to do was set aside $250,000 every year for a section to be re-roofed. So it would be about an acre of roof every year. Today, in today's world, it must be about $300,000 per. I started in this plant here when I got out of college in Buffalo. Windshield wipers. I was 19 years old at the time. I started right in the manufacturing engineering department. I was a die casting technician. Die casting is subsequent machining. We worked on cars. We had our Trico windshield wiper equipment on cars like this classic 57 Chevy. These are escutcheons from the outside of the, right there, the windshield wiper. It was my job to follow the operators around and make sure they didn't make castings that look like this. If you see all the pits and things, General Motors and the other car companies just wouldn't put up with it. So dye temperature, whoops, little loud. Dye temperature is critical. So I had to follow them around with a pyrometer and do a lot of development with that kind of thing. And then I had to follow up with subsequent sheeting and trimming. Everybody that's familiar with those old cars knows that the vacuum windshield motor. The key there, the reason I showed it is because Trico is no longer in business as the same company. They carry the same name. They had to move out of Buffalo, and all they make is windshield wipers. Now, that's all, just the wipers. The reason that they never went to electric motors for the wipers. One of the reasons that I was told was that the head of the company, which was a family company, he said, well, electric wipers they'll never fly because they've got 6-volt systems in the car. And guess what? They went to 12-volt systems and everybody got electric wipers and Trico was just that area. So I came into Sydney in 1959 and it looked just like this. This was actually near Route 8. I went up Main Street, if you remember. That was my badge, that was my face. It wasn't quite the same badge because this one had holes in it. This is the one they gave me when I came back to work in 1990 to work as a space station job. They had the same picture on the badge that they had when I came in 1959. By and by, they put me to work making cams for these single spindle round and sharp automatic screws. We had quite a number of batteries. We had a battery up in apartment 52 contact. We had apartment 26. We had quite a battery in there. And we had some down in apartment 48 shelter sheeting. We wanted to train a guy to make cams, design cams, and make them right in-house. So they sent me to school with Brown and Sharp. I learned how to do this. And the dark line is a lead cam. I probably designed about, in 3 years, about 300 sets of cams. And Chris Capella told me that some of them were still in use after the flood because the floodwaters destroyed the CNC machines, and they had to resort back to the Brown and Sharps for use. Enough about me. Okay, this is Sydney about 1910. Keep doing it, Sarah. Main Street goes along here and right up the hill, and it went over Old Wood Road and up over the hill. It didn't curve around the mountain like this at that time. But I draw your attention to these buildings over here. This was a furniture factory originally, owned by the Cyber family. And Portland Truck Carriage about 1890 or so in Portland first. And so they came down and took ownership of these buildings. This is the corner of Union Street and Patterson on this side, Division Street on this side. There was a furniture factory here. As you know, Delaware Street goes up along the top of this bank. The bank is pretty low, but there was hardly anybody living back here in the flat. All of this was practically farmland. There's two houses here, one on the corner of Union Street. This is the building, the creek that comes out past the hospital. There was a house over here, and I think that was the Glasner house that's still on the corner of DeWitt, Pearl Street. No, Pearl Street was kind of a dirt country road at the time. There's a map of Sydney at about the same time, about 1900. And you'll notice that there are no other streets up above Little Chestnut Street that comes out of West Main Street, except Delaware Street. It came down, at least on the map, it stopped here. I think probably it was a dirt lane that ran down this way, which is present Delaware Street. This is Union Street right here, and Sherman Avenue comes in today, in this area, but there was a road here that's connected to Camping Street, which came from River Street across the track and back up the hill like that. The reason it was called Swamp Road was for obvious reasons. It was very swamp area. It was a wetland, actually. The Steel Mill Railroad spur here, that's where the Hatfield buildings were, right in there. The Hatfield buildings straddled and right up close to the track. There's a baseball field was just about on the circle in front of the old plant. Now we can see the Hatfield buildings peeking around up here. The train, the engine on the tracks at the back. And along in here, there was a road, there was the swamp road that ran right along there. And right along the swamp road was a creek. And that creek is the same creek that comes down around by the hospital and goes along by Delaware Street down. It was all filled in and redirected down along Delaware Street. We had a big hotel right on the corner there where Andy Mathiak's video entertainment plus store is at the present time called Sidney. Here's another shot of the Sidney Hotel. There were two major railroad tracks that came through town. One was B&H Railroad, the other was on this side, was the old company, of course. And we had the station here at that time. Right here, station. I think this little shanty was there when I came to town. This building here is still there and houses, this building still houses Sidney Printing and a few other things. But that's the way it looked about 1900, right? Just before 1918, before I don't know if you can hear me.
Yep.
But 1918, January of 1918, the Sidney Hotel became a pile of ashes. This is the cover over here. Sorry.
Let me get it caught up, Dave.
Okay, there. Press the wrong button, I'm sorry. Now, there was the Sidney Novelty Works. It was on the corner of Union and Patterson Street there, where Scovino is now. same year, that burned to the ground. The whole thing, plus the lumber yard, and I really think that probably the lumber yard was over in this area. This would be Division Street. This would be Union Street here. That went with it, plus about 17 houses. It was a very windy day. It was a Saturday in May. The sparks and the embers flew all over town and almost took Sidney down. Sometime around that era, and it was about the same time, was the silk mill, Kaiser Silk Mill. They were having labor trouble. And it was kind of turned into what the problem was that the company had rejected their request to form a union. And so they walked out, and it just escalated from there into a bigger mess. And things were kind of tough in Sydney. I threw this one in because this was a celebration that apparently went on at about the same time. The Army visited town and camped on site. Whitaker is here, and I think maybe that's your grandfather's car sitting there with.
It must be.
Yeah. Yep, be right there. But yes, I don't need to say that things are so bad in Sydney that the governor had to bring the National Guard in, and the Red Cross had to come in and help the wounded. So Hatfield was making cars at the time, and they were offering cars like this for $950. And here's a couple more of them. I don't know if you can read the prices on there. The bottom one was $14.95. And the old buildings over there that were Hatfield, they were busy.
We have that picture.
And this is a view of the same buildings from Camp Street looking east. This is the other side of it. There's a hot little speedster for $875. But there was another guy in Detroit who was making cars too. And he was pretty cocky. He turned out his 15 millionth car sometime around 1915, I think. And in terms of dollars, Hatfield's cars, look at them, $950, $495. In today's dollars, would be $14,250.22, whereas the Ford Model T was selling for $555. So comparing the prices in today's dollars to the Hatfield price, it's isn't any wonder that people were buying Fords rather than Hatfield. And probably others. So Hatfield had somebody caught their picture here going to the bank in their last car, taking out their funds and getting out of town. That's not true. Ladies, they didn't know what to do with themselves, so
Dave gave it to me.
so they were idle. I want you to take a look at, they're sitting on a plank. That plank is a little bridge to cross that creek that we were talking about before down there. You can just see the glimmer of the water. There's the creek right there. That's how close that is. The skilled labor that were working at Hatfield, they didn't have anything to do, so they're sitting around on their cans. And I think that the people who were sitting by that time kind of thought that the world was dropping out from under them. I don't think it was quite this bad. I happened to find this one, and I just throw it in for There's a postcard that went out. They were looking for help. Come, Sidney. We're waiting for you. This fellow had been an accountant for the Hatfield company, Whitfield Sherwood. And he raised some money for the village fathers, an amount of $3,000, and went looking for somebody to occupy and buy the Hatfield building. So he got a hold of a guy in Detroit named Wilder, Lawrence Wilder. And Wilder was a wheeler dealer. And he had already been in touch with another company in New York. So it was selling magneto. They called themselves Scintilla. They were part of, I'm sorry that the bottom part of this is cut off. But they were a branch of, an Americanized branch of Brown Bavarian Switzerland. And come over here and set up shop to set up a new magneto, which was considered to be a very precision magneto and much advanced in the day. These were the first gentlemen who came. They saw the ad, got in touch with Mr. Wilder, came to Sydney with Herman Hanning. This was Walter J. Spangler, the engineer. This was Tom Fagan, he was the salesman. And George Steyer was the accountant for that group. George didn't come right away. Mr. Hanning was the general manager of the management group. The outfit in New York. The one in New York, this is actually the, I don't know what period this was taken. It may not have been that period, but this is a hotel December, and it's much bigger. If you don't sit today, it's built out this way almost double. Maybe they did that after the Sydney hotel burned, in order, because they knew they wanted to draw more business. They took out an option on these buildings, and it was in September. And then about December, their options started running out. So the village reminded them of it. They came to this building here and had a meeting with the town fathers. The women wanted a big dinner, and they signed the papers and finally bought the buildings. I'm thinking they must have bought machinery too, because the idea of buying this building, they at the first they didn't call themselves a magneto company. They just said they were a division, Scintilla division of American Brown Gold Company. They're still connected to Switzerland. Reading back through the annals that were written by John McLaughlin, for one, included 75 acres south of the railroad track. Now, this is a 1943 flat map, so it didn't look like that at this time. But I outlined 75 acres on here. I thought it would go along Union Street up to Pearl Street, which is probably a dirt road or a dirt lane at that time, over to the oops, over to Camp Meeting Street, And I laid it out from the Delaware County mapping tool they have online. And it's actually 75 acres right there. So obvious to me that they actually bought all this land right up to Pearl. Only thing that's left of it now that they don't, the only thing that's left now is the pines, which are about 7 acres on this side of Delaware. All the rest of this still belongs to Aetna. And as you know, it's a solar panel field now. Just taking a look at that same area, you can see it. This picture with this aerial view was taken, I think, about 1954. And this would be Pearl Street here, this is Union Street down here, and this would be Canton Street coming up here. This first street that comes up here after is called Annie Street. So I'm thinking that the village fathers at the time had acquired this land and been relinquished by Scintilla, and they named it Annie Street after the man who was in charge. Webb Street is over here. The reason I say is I think in 1954, my wife Mary Jane told me that her father didn't build the clinic here, they built a clinic, which is right here until 1953, and it's obviously there. So what's a magneto? A small generator of electricity powered by passing a conductive wire coil through a magnetic field, by passing a magnetic field through a wire coil to generate current or a spark gas in an internal combustion engine. The magnet is usually permanent. It's made from magnetic iron material as opposed to an electric current induced magnet. A guy in 1833 in England invented the magneto. It was crude, but he had discovered that when all the scientists over in Europe were playing with newfound electricity and learning things about it, he learned that by passing the bar magnet through a coil of wire, he could induce a current in the coil of wire. And that was a revolutionary, very revolutionary discovery. So this is Kathy Barnhart's feed length. This is a 1942 picture. They did use magnetos in this plane. They had evidently no electric starter in this plane. So they had to kickstart by turning the propeller. That would move the magnet in the rotor, the magnet in the magneto, and that's what started the spark the plane. You can see by his stance, he's getting ready to get out of the way when that thing started. Moving back a few years, 1903, we went to Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, Wright's brothers. And one of them, I think, was Orville, was flying a plane prone, laying prone on the plane. And this was Wilbur right here. Oh, I'm sorry. He was the younger one. It looked like it was on track, skid right here. And probably the wing was propped up on this tool. I don't quite know what this is, but I've got an idea. There was 2 propellers on this, so it'd be very awkward for this guy. Well, this guy was here to spin those propellers to start the plane. So he may have had some way of starting the spark plugs with a battery box or possibly even another magneto that was sitting here. This is room for more research. I can't get into it, but this plane flew for about 12 seconds. That was considered the first motor flight. So later on, I think they tried it 2 or 3 times the same day and crashed the plane. And then they went over, worked on it, they took it to Europe. And they flew it over there and they flew it for several minutes around the field. So it caught on, but it didn't catch on. You know, the press did not catch on in 1903 and make a big deal out of it. Nobody paid too much attention to it for about 3 years until the Air Force, the Army at the time, Army Air Force, got wind of it and thought, well, this is the way of the future. So, then Europe caught on too, and they were doing the same thing. And they developed very, very fast. But this, I believe, is the magneto right here that was used in there. This was a different concept. It had these horseshoe magnets. These are horseshoe magnets here, like we used to play with when we were kids. And they crank the coil in there, crank the coil inside the magnet in order to get the spark. And that was the kind of magneto that they had. This is the very motor that they had in that first right aircraft. And that's the magneto right there. I don't quite understand what the coil is about, but that may have been the coil to give the magnet a little more whooping. Anyway, those kind of magnets, those kind of magnetos were not very reliable. They were being used in the early planes up until the First World War. But then I understand that during the First World War, these very Scintilla magnetos were being used in First World War planes. It was a different concept, and that was where you rotate the magnet. The coil was stationary, not the other way around. This is an installation drawing, very much like we were using down at the plant when we were doing layout work for these things. There is a cutaway, an actual magneto. There is the rotary magnet. There's the coil. What's missing here is a pole shoe which transfers the magnetism to this iron block that goes through the center of the coil. And then it goes through a breaker system and into the distributor. So it's a generator, coil, distributor, breaker system, all in one. And it weighs probably about 20 pounds compared to what you would have to do with an automobile. And this end is an impulse coupling, which is used to keep that magnet going quickly, because it has to. If it doesn't, it doesn't give you the spark that you need. These are 2 magnets that I had. Those are 2 of the magnets that are used in that rotor. I didn't steal them really, but I have them. And they were used here in the rotor. They're embedded in this rotor here, which is pressed on to the shaft, And this other thing here looks like, to me, I don't know exactly what it is. It looks like a splasher or some kind of a mechanism for cooling the whole engine. The oil splasher, I do believe. This is a picture of the workforce in that of the new Scintilla Magneto company in the old building. It may have been closer to 1930, 60 people in here. Dennis Porter's father and grandfather are both in there somewhere. But I couldn't find them, and I'm going to have to send him the picture and see if he can identify them. But this mural is still on the wall. This is on the wall down at the new plant in the lobby. This goes. This is Mr. Steiner, and this is Mr. Spengler right here. The engineer, two guys in the white shirts and tie. Everybody else is a worker of some kind. Now this is Dennis Porter's father, Claude Porter. In 1965, September 65, he became the first 40-year employee. That would be 40 years from 1925. He was one of the first, Dennis will be one of the first 10 employees. And so he was pictured on Scintilla, which at that time was our news magazine from 1942 until 1966. It was discontinued then. It was printed by the Courier down in the Pilot. This is a kind of a keynote of the attitude we have down at the plant. Mr. Spengler, this is one of the first things he did was make that sign. And it kind of explains itself. But yes, you can imagine that everything you did for a pilot. The pilot was up in the air and it failed. The pilot's dead. So you had to do it right the first time. And this was an attitude that was instilled in us right from the beginning. General Manager Herman Hannigan, writing in March, the excellence of Scintilla manufacturing, careful workmanship, sound principles of customer relations. Research and engineering have played and will continue to play important roles in the Scintilla organization. That was a very key thing. That kind of told me what the attitude of the management was. Engineering, research, and engineering. Actually, at one time, Betty Gilbert, who was here, wrote that we had 500 people in the engineering department. And that's kind of astounding because, you know, when you run into hard times in industry, some of the first things to go are research, inspection, training. Those are the first things they go. And that did not happen down until the food of the management having the tenacity, tenacious enough to keep the place alive. I guess you all know this is Charlie Lindbergh. And he wanted to go across the Atlantic. He was a barn farmer. He wanted to solo across the Atlantic. And so he wanted a couple of reliable magnetos. So these are very similar to the two. He had to have two. Every plane has to have two. At least two ignition systems to magnetos. I'll get into that later. These magnetos of this type were manufactured here in Sydney. And Ron McCall used to told me that his father was a plant engineer at the time, and he took great pride in taking those down to New York, given to Tom Fagan. Tom Fagan was the salesman. He did the last inspection on them, final inspection on them. They were installed in the Lindbergh plane. That's a fuzzy picture, so, but there they are. And I put a better picture in. There the magnetos are, right? The one there and one there. And this was a rather small airplane engine, by the way. Rotary engine. There we go. That was kind of the same picture of the same thing. It's in a museum somewhere. And he controlled the magnetos from the inside of the plane. He had a switch. He had a right, you could use the right leg magneto, the left magneto, or both magnetos. Or you wouldn't want to turn them off. But he could use both of them. He could control it from the inside of the plane, and there's the cockpit on the inside of the plane, right there. And there's the switch. And I had one of those, but it was lost in the flood in 2011. So you can see how simple that cockpit is, that panel. Would you rather have that, John Plummer? You're in St. Louis. Solo flight, Roosevelt Field, Garden City, New York, landed 33 hours in this plane to Paris, a distance of 3,600 miles. There was the engine. It was a rotary, signified by the arm, the rotary engine that had 790 cubic inch displacement. That's what that means. But the fact that it went that far, that long, with two magnetos that did not fail at all, was the selling point that Tom Fagan had to convince the armed forces, which is the Army and Navy, to buy our magnetos down here. That's where we started to grow from that. This is the Swiss Club. That was taken probably around 1930, at that time. And some of you and myself knew these fellows. I worked for this man for 5 years, 4 years. This was Albert Egley, and I'll talk about him a little bit more in a minute. And Mr. Spengler, Mr. Haney, Walter Hediger. He was head of the layout department. He was the one that hired me, Ian Herman. I was interviewed by both of them. Walter Hertog, he had retired by the time I got there. And Tullio Tondola, who ran the experimental department in the engineering, the experimental. These other fellows here, this was Herman Winkler, and this was Eddie Kleiner. I think Walt Weileman was up here, and this was Bernie Weiss. Maybe some of you know the names better than I do. All Swiss, all great gentlemen to work with. They really were. This man, I understand he was a very tough looking. He was Albert Egley. And not Senior. There was an Albert Jr. And I worked with Albert Jr. He was a really nice, great fellow, very helpful. But he was the first factory manager. And he had started, well, he was Swiss, he started over in Switzerland, he jumped around a lot, bounced around. He came over here and worked in Bosch, which is another magneto company in Springfield, Massachusetts. Um, Then he went back to Switzerland and he became an inspector in the Brown Bavarian factory over there, Scintilla factory. And then he got into sales. He came back to this country and he couldn't sell the Swiss magneto here. We got discouraged and quit, and he went to Otis Elevator. But while he had been in Switzerland, he had made friends with Herman Hanning. Herman knew where he was in New York City. And he went after him to be the factory manager of this fledgling factory down here. He was responsible for a great deal of the expansion of the new buildings down there and the design of the new buildings. And he had some of the patents and improvements on the magneto. But he worked that job. You can imagine how much he worked because of the growth of the factory. Up through World War II to 1943, when he had to retire for himself. And I can understand why he did that. So he was idle for about a year. And his son Henry, which many of us knew, was in the service during the war, and he wrote to him and said, you know, when I get out of the service, it would be a good idea. Why don't we open a tool shop in Sydney and just work together? And he thought that was a pretty good idea. So that's what Egley Machine started over on the other side of the river. So he ran it. He retired probably around the 60s sometime. I used to see him walking around the circle, our circle, because Ruth Van Horst lived up there. And that was his daughter, one of his daughters. Grace was the other one, Grace Anderson. So he was quite an old man for that time. But he was still going. So, but anyway, the Egley Company lasted over there quite a long time. I think it's been recently sold the last few years. But they did a lot of very precision toolwork for us. We couldn't handle it all. We had, in our plant down here, we had something like 200 toolmakers at one time. And a lot of what they were doing was just simply maintaining tools, replacing tools in the shop. It wouldn't make a lot of new stuff. So we had to go to the Egley Company for tools, molds and dies and that kind of thing. High precision stuff. So that's how we worked with them. Now that we had, as I mentioned before, competition in the Bosch Company in Springfield. A lot of those Swiss guys came from Bosch in Springfield. This was the American Bosch. Bosch is a big company in Germany. We have a Bosch dishwasher in our house. They make all kinds of things. They're like the GE of Germany. But they were still making magnetos. Here I go picking this up. Probably something like this. These are rather cumbersome and heavy, too much, and not as reliable. And that's why this was where we had the stationary magnet rotating coil. Whereas was a revolutionary design with the rotating magnet and the stationary coil. So anyway, we're situated in these buildings now, and the still American Brown Bavarian. And this picture was taken somewhere, well, about where the Sunoco station is now. down on Union Street. And this would be the swap road going up this way. Um, Now, in those old wood buildings, we had these overhead pulley systems driven by one motor, one huge motor. It would drive all the belts and pulleys on the machine. This is just an example. These ladies weren't the ones that were sitting out front. These ladies were, I think this is a much older picture. This gal here, it looks like she's running the trimming press here, punch press. And the parts are dropping off down in a box down here. And these are the kinds of things that I had to work on when I was in Trico to keep the parts from getting all taped up. But they would look nice on the front of the Chevy. But anyway, notice that these gals have got all their hair. They were wearing long hair these days. This was taken, this was early 1900s. They all got their hair done up in a cap. And that's to keep their hair from getting tangled in those belts, because if they did, watch out, they would take it sculpted. And I saw that happen when I was in Trico. The girl had long tresses of red hair, and she was working on a dope press at night, and it got caught in the spindle like this, and she couldn't get out of it, the sculptor. So the next morning, the foreman took all the ladies and took them all up there and showed. He didn't take it. And so it's kind of a ghastly sight. In order to make sure he was pressing a foot, you got to wear your hat. And they really didn't do a very good job of that afterward. So now they had the buildings, and they were kind of just vacant, profit-wise. But they were making a good product. And Pratt & Whitney was a big engine, and First Right, both of them, two big engines. They were investing in our Scintilla here. But Vincent Bendix had started the Bendix Aviation Company, and he was acquiring divisions all over the place. One of them was a division called Eclipse in Elmira, and several. Anyway, he built his business up to about 32 divisions all over. But this was about 1929, and he knew that magazines were a good thing for his business, so he enticed them to sell to him so that they could join the Bendix Corporation. They still didn't have a lot of capital, as I say. They were making the payroll, and they were probably getting by. They didn't have a lot of the capital money that they needed to improve it, because that building was a very drafty, old building. When the train came up the track, it shook, and they had, you're making a precision product, and a building would shake, and all your gauges have to be reset, and all of this sort of stuff. So they knew that they had to get something more for themselves. So Vincent Bendix came along, and he had the capital to do that. I already said this, the Eclipse machines, the double manual company. Just wanted to highlight that, among others, Pioneer Instrument Company, I think it was a date, also carburetor, et cetera. So he helped to build the first building has been written. Alfred Higley had a lot to do with the design of this first building. And this is the building where actually the tool room was housed. And you can see right here. There's that plant. Still there that those ladies were saying. The old creek went across it. This is an old swampy place all the way through. So building started, and there was one of it right there. This was the early 30s. About 1935, this was taken probably from either from an airplane or from about south toward across probably Wingard Street or one of those down there, showing the way the plant was progressing. So then in front of the plant, they were starting to tear down the old buildings. They had to build parts of the plant to move stuff from the old buildings to the new buildings. And so they built the new plant in pieces. And of course, it was catching on. It was catching on quite a lot because in the early 30s, the Army Air Force and the Navy were very much interested in the business was growing. And this looks like the swamp road down here. Still going across here, but here's the new part of the office building peeking out there. So, they were building offices at the same time. They were building factories. And this would be Camp Meeting Street, looking back toward the ends of those buildings, probably about 1936, 38, judging from the vintage of the park. And this would be from probably the upper story of the old buildings, looking across toward Union Street, the corner of Union Street, Delaware, as you can see. Corner of Union Street, Delaware. This is where the front circle will be. Excuse me, no, it will be right here, because they had already made the gate here. This was the back side of those offices that were building out front. And there was the start, probably around 1938, 39, 40, of the new office wings of the front. And that's the way we looked around 1940. They were still moving stuff from the old buildings to the new. This is really a nice picture. But you can see that they're starting to take down the last of these buildings here, right there. And then, you know what? Everybody remembers that day, probably most of you here. I do remember that day because I was supposed to go sledding that day, and my father canceled that activity because somebody had bombed some island out in the Pacific, and I couldn't figure out why. That our sledding should be canceled. He sat by the radio all afternoon. This happened about while we were in church on Sunday morning, or just after we got out of church. But this is Pearl Harbor, and that's the Arizona, and that's the one. That's one of the Oklahoma that got totally destroyed. And there's some 1,900 men still buried in that hole. And there's a memorial there. You should see it if you go. And this was the plan of attack of the Japanese plane against Pearl Harbor. The ships in black are the ones that were totally destroyed. The ones in blue were very much destroyed. The ones in white were spared. And it was just a good thing that our aircraft carriers were out at sea at that time. But anyway, somebody got a picture of Mr. Hanning when he was spoke about this. He he had 4,000 people a week. I could just imagine that, because he knew what was
And
coming.
this is David's son.
And here are some fellows that some people here know very much. They were the supervision of the plant at the time. Carl Kimmer was the factory superintendent. Herman Winkler was also a supervisor. His bailiwick was all the practices. He was painting, finishing. Herman Keller, he was the supervisor of production engineering. Van Diem was the head of the personnel department. He was the one that started the simulator. Jim Green, I knew him. He was also factory superintendent. The other guys I didn't know, they were gone when I got there. But I really have to say that I'm honoring these people today for what they had to take on during World War II. The way the production increases and the sudden increase in employment from about 4,000 people in 1940 to almost 9,000 people, almost immediately. You can imagine. And there's my boss, old boss Herman. He was his bark was worse than his bite, believe me. He never changed his expression. But I did like him. I did. This is Mr. Egley. This guy here is Blake Welsh, and he was first pilot, I believe, in Sydney before Barney's death. Correct?
Correct.
And they're pondering some very serious stuff right here. Gas rationing. Yes. These are the stamps we had to use. I didn't have to use, you had to use them. To get gas during the war. You had a sticker on your car. Low priority, most people had it, was A. If you had any kind of a job that benefited more work, like teacher, even teachers, or had to drive any distance during the day to work in a defense plant or something, you had a B or a C. And then anybody that did trucking, you had a T. And that sticker was in your windshield,
And two.
right there. This is a 39 Chevy. My dad had one of these, but it wasn't a Woody. He had it all during the war. Rationing on all kinds of good things that we eat. My ration books. About every year you had to have a new book. And in order to buy all kinds of things that I showed you, you had to use a stamp. If you ran out of stamps, guess what? You had to borrow one from your neighbor or something. These are the types of stamps that were being used. It must have been a real nightmare for storekeepers at the gas station at the they have to account for these stamps. Your sugar ration is 2 pounds per month. I remember coffee. My mother complaining that she couldn't get good coffee anymore. All of this was going to the service, more effort. You couldn't get a lot of it because it wasn't being manufactured anymore either, because people weren't served. So hickory gardens, lots of people were encouraged to put in hickory gardens to supplement their diet. We had buses bringing people from all over 50 miles around. Dale coming in, picking up people every shift. There's a utility worker. Train. Everybody's knows this gotta know that this is Sidney from downtown. Used to be a water tower up between the. We believe this is an O&W train, looks like. Because the crossing was way up there, and the O&W comes out this side, the P&H was coming on this side. With always been a controversy. Somebody brought it up about a year ago on historical center, whether they dropped people off by the plant or whether they brought them down to the station. This is up here is the eve of the station, so still don't know. Somebody can answer that question. Right of yes, true. Very important. Some of these people were 60 years old, and they carried a billy club. I know these people. They weren't Sidney people. I just had that picture, so I put it in to illustrate. Wearing a helmet, having a whistle. They often had an armband, and they carried the billy club. And they walked around the neighborhood when we had blackouts. We had blackout films. We had to cover our windows on the inside. And they had to make sure that no light was taken out of the window in a blackout film. We blacked out because there was a great fear in 1942 and 1943 of German planes coming and bombing. So we sat in the dark in the house for an hour or so until they blew the all clear. Housing. Now this is why I went back to this 1942 flag. And as you can see from this plot, all of this housing was due just about 1940, just before the war. This was called Sherwood Heights after the guy that had made the brokered the deal to get Scintilla to come from New York to Sydney. This was called the Sidney Heights, right here. Prior to that, there was hardly anything farmers fields north of, south of Carlson. This, you'll notice there's no DeWitt or Edgewood in here. So Overlook Drive was due. This was not due. This was a campground. This was the campground at that time. It's not the way it's configured today. It's more old. I think this is a little west of that end, and that's comes out of Overlook and Pineview, kind of like this. These houses were all built by foreign government people, by contractors, the name of which was Sears was one of the builders, Ford was another. Whether they were connected with the Ford company and Sears drove up, I'm not sure. I think they may have been, but they're all cookie cutter houses, as you know. I owned one for 45 years. They were all pretty well built. Over on this side, this, as I said, was Sherwood. They said that from the air, this profile was a profile of a magneto, and I couldn't figure that out. It must be looking at one from the side. This would be the back end, and this would be the floor housing that comes up this way. That's all I can understand. course, this was what the old timers had called Brooklyn, Cherry Street, etc. Down on this end of that. But all of this up in here was the open farm. But the village farmers, the village people in Mr. Hanny must have gotten together and seen what was coming. The requirement for housing, and I read the paper. We have a similar effort going on today, and I think I'm pleased to see that again. I'm delighted. We do need housing. This was about wartime, right here. By that time, Sherwood Heights, the project, so-called the project, this is where most of us started when we came to Sidney for our family. Well, Sherwood Heights, and we've got a better picture of that. You'll notice written street roots in Crystal. Look at, this was Sherwood Heights. This is put up with brand new. Built the housing projects for defense purposes, and they were built with federal government funding. Most towns around any defense plans had similar projects like that. In my town, I lived halfway between Curtis Wright Factory in Buffalo and Bell Aircraft in Niagara Falls. So we had one in our town, similar. And I think they had one down in Towson, Maryland, near the Bendix radio. So that's the way it looked back then. Hospital. That, with all that building and all those new people coming in, town fathers realized we had to have a hospital. The ground was broken on our hospital in 1942. How many hours were worked in a defense plant? 7 days a week. Many factories around the clock. This testimony here was given by a guy down in Mobile, Alabama. But that was kind of typical of all the four plants at that time. Until the workers worked 3 shifts, 7 days a week, for between 40 and $1 an hour. Probably $1 an hour was very good at that time. But housing was still very, very difficult. And there were many people boarding in this. And some to the extent where the owner of the house, the boarding house, would make a bed for one shift and make a bed again for somebody on the second shift. And they call it hot sheeting. So people on different shifts use the same bed. 4 bots, we were asked to buy bots out of our wages. And this was a denomination was particularly high. Most of it was $25 by you bought. You bought it for $18.75, and the way you got $18.75 was to buy 25-cent stamps. 25-cent stamp in those days had the buying power of about $4 today. And I remember when I was a kid, my mother gave me 50 cents to get 2 stamps at school. I stuck them in my mitten coming home and had a snowball fight. Took them out of my mitten and hid them under a bush underneath a snowball and continued to fight. And then I came back and of course all the snowballs looked the same. So I had to go home and tell her what I did. She was living. Well, $8. Think, $8. She had given me in the morning, and I just took it. So in the spring, she was walking for the library. She walked by that spot, and it was raining, and she had to look down and saw 2 stamps under the bush. True story. So anyway, they had about 6 different contracts. They did. The government needed money to run the war. Everybody put all the departments put an American flag up. Everybody. This guy looks here like, I swear it's more than doing it. And I think it is. He was one of my good friends down there. Everybody maybe remember Margaret Gruber. This is the corner of Delaware and Union Street. There's by the village hall, all the cars. I'm sure that will work that picture as well. Tires were real problem. You couldn't get rubber, of course. I don't know if I mentioned, but the Japanese had dominated the Pacific, and so you couldn't get no rubber. So rubber was very difficult. There was actually a board here was manned by Captain Fox, and they were looking for solutions to people to save on various things. Encouraged to start this is a training, and this was in the play. You can look by it at these people and you can say, well, they really enjoyed their training. But this is what they went through about 2 weeks. They all got here and they had to learn blueprint reading and all that stuff. A lot of these, as you'll notice, are girls, young ladies. They're taking the place of 1,000 guys that he had to leave to go in the service. These desks are the same desks that we used at the training department when I had orientation down there. And I want you to look at something. Back of the light is peeking through this window. Those windows, all the windows in the plant were painted in 1943, 40, 42, 43. The paint was finally washed off in 1944. That was to prevent the light at night from shining through the plant to get target for Sherman water plant. But you can see that somebody either opened the window and let the sunlight peek through. They washed them off with some kind of solvent. They didn't go at the sprinkler. But I wouldn't have wanted to have that job. And there was what the best dressed gal looked like working in the factory, according to Mr. Van Main. But he tried to promote this, and it didn't get. Okay, wonderful. Notice the hats. Yep. This is kind of what the shop looked like. It was just loaded with machinery, loaded with cans of parts. I know exactly where this was taken. If any of you worked on a plant, you know where Department 26, and you know where the old crib was. It went right down the hall, right out there, hall with the east entrance, with the sales department on the other side. So I know where that was. That was where you fellows that worked on the plant, this was Department 29, right here, or what it was. War. They had they had promotional war bonds right here. Talk about congestion. Wow. War. And look at the number of ladies that are working there. A lot of women in that sheet shop. And I think this was later. This was like 1944 because the paint is all been scraped off the window. And of course, we had our sample, but still. And one of the victims of this was Larry's tour. One of my old bosses, his name is Al Hogan. He was actually an uncle of Joan and Tony Berman. This was his brother. And he somehow had time for a little fun too, even with all the work that they had to do. This was Bill Berger. He took Ralph Cooper's place. This was Dick Riker. He was an old supervisor, old design supervisor. This is Ed Berger. He was a plant engineer when I started working for Herman Keller. I worked in the same office with Ed. This was Art Tyler's brother, Lloyd Tyler. This was Andy Prohaska. He was the brother-in-law of Herman. Herman's wife is his sister. This was Art Fargo. I worked with him at the layout department. Diesel, Ed. And this is when they got an Army Navy E award. And one of the generals came down and awarded it. And they allowed all of the employees to turn out for that celebration. I don't know if it was a work day or whether it was a Sunday. I see a lot of white shirts. I'm not sure. That's what it was. Great picture. So what did we do? I wondered. And I went over and talked to Chris Capello one day because I wondered if there was any records of what we did. This is December 41 to August 1945. This is the number of magnetos made. That equates to about 650 to 700 a day. It turned out. And remember the switches that he talked about. They made, in some aircraft, used the same switches that we were making. And then they used harnesses, and this was to harness the leads that came out of the menus to the various leads on the spark plugs. Spark plugs, we were in that business. Fuel pumps, diesel fuel pumps, we were in that business. Nozzle holders, that was part of the diesel. So I thought it was very impressive. I had been doing some work. Oh, this was before I get into that, this was a single magneto, not a tool. It was used on tanks, Sherman tanks. It was used on Sherman tanks, on those tanks that used an aircraft engine. They made 59,000 Sherman tanks. But not all of them used an aircraft engine. Only if, I'm going to guess maybe 4 because after they changed those engines to a Ford V8, and then they changed them later to a diesel. So that's the little single magneto that was used on those light. This is a dual magneto. I was under the impression that dual magnetos didn't come into use until late in World War II. But I was totally wrong. There's a part number out there in the 5,000 series, and that would be very, 10 days, 5,000 would be very low. So they started making magnetos way back in the early dual magnetos, back in the early 30s. What a dual magneto is, one rotor and two coils, one on each side, the distributors one on each side. And many of them, they didn't have a distributor. I'll show you. Here's another one right there. Dual magneto. I was under the impression, and a lot of people were under the impression, there were two magnetos on every aircraft engine, but that's not true. They had one dual magneto, but they had two distributors. It was probably a low voltage magneto. This was on right with the 2800. I'll be talking about that again. Dual magneto, we had the very common one was the TF18LN. That means it served an 18-cylinder magneto. The D means if it's got an F, it's a single magneto. So I highlighted the T-47 Republic of Thunderbolt for a purpose, and I'll tell you about that later. But those are the planes. There were many planes that were, different planes that were being made. Not today, but there was really only about 5 engines. I like this picture. This was one that was in the Post article. It shows Mr. Steiner, Mr. Steiner sitting down, and Tom Hagen, the sales guy, standing up. It was taken in 1950, so that's why Mr. Hannian did it. But this magneto that he seems to be working is a dual magneto machine. And I think that's the Plummer sitting right there on it. That these others are cutaways for training purposes. This looks like a single. And this may be a dual here too. But there's an interesting part, a couple of interesting things to know. He has an old badge. Those disappeared in the early 1960s when Don Jones became general manager. Everybody, all the executives, directors, had gold badge. And there were certain cocktail parties around town that were being manned by folks that would only bring people to the cocktail party. So you had them all taken off and changed the red badge, like every other executive. So the other thing is, Tom's got a cigarette in his hand. Here, I was amazed at that picture. But the window is open, thank God. But that was true right up to my time when I worked for Herman. Smoking in the offices was actually commonplace. And these blueprints, they're old blueprints. We worked with those blueprints. First time I went in the layout department and worked with blueprints this size. These old blueprints. One of the guys that was in there said, "What are you doing, Dave? Building a locomotive?" It was hard to look at. Talking about some of the planes that they were used on. This is a Martin Marauder B-26. B-26. Look at the bottom of it here. This is the B-24, the Liberator bomber. It's probably the oldest bomber that they made, and it was the most of the bombers that they ever made. And I want you to he's not showing it, is these engines are all open. They're big, snubby, open fronts like this. Those are air-cooled rotary engines. There are two types of engines. I made this chart, and it showed the 10 or 12, like 12, bombers. Most made bombers, probably 80%. What I was trying to do is I was trying to equate the numbers of magnetos that were made to the bomber. And it is not a very accurate chart. If you would take a picture of this. We had many aircraft companies making different planes. Were all being used, but we only had about 5 actual engines that were being used, mostly by Pratt & Whitney, made by Pratt & Whitney or Curtiss Wright. These are the engines here. These numbers don't mean anything. I show you this picture because there's a B-17, and there's that open column behind of the engine, behind the propeller. This guy right here is true air helmet. Very small.
The original bunker.
The original bunker helmet. But these planes, this is the Lockheed Lightning, it's your fuselage from this. And these had a different engine. They're closed, they're pointy, they're closed. This is the most feared fighter in World War II. It was reported to have shot down more Japanese planes than any other plane. And the Germans were terribly afraid of it because it was a great strafing plane. And the engine, they had 2 engines in it. This was the famous P-51. That was also, noticed, they had a pointed front end. That had a V engine in it as well. And here's a group of some of these planes. And this was a Bel Air Cobra. They were built for the Bel Air Cobra. They were built about 10 miles north of where I lived. And this is a Curtiss P-40, and they were built in Buffalo, about 10 miles south of where I lived. You can imagine, I lived in a place that was heavily guarded and heavily populated with people that worked and worked. This one here, I think it's a P-47. Looks very good. This is what I'm telling you to keep your eye on. Any plane with a pointed nose like this had V engine in it. The P-51, which was the Mustang, this is a chart of those. Just a chart I made and trying to analyze where all the magnetos went. And when they were built, what engines they used. Ellison Division of General Motors made the V1710, which was used in the Bel Air Cobra and in the Curtis P40 and the Lockheed Lightning, for example. The Brett Whitney plane was, Brett Whitney built what they call the R1830, the R2800. These were rotary engines. Those numbers, as I said before, are the cubic inch displacement of those engines. They were huge. Your car, your automobile is, I don't know what it is, 200, 300, but you can imagine the power of those engines. The Wright made the Cyclone engines, and Pratt Whitney made what they call the WASP series of engines. Packard also made an engine. That's why I showed you this. Remember those Packard cars? They had a V12 engine. And so they were tapped to make a V1600 engine for the P51. And it was patterned after the engine that was made by Rolls-Royce called the Merlin, and it was used in the Spitfires, which were high-performance planes, some of the best planes ever built. I think P-51 was the fastest at the time. But here's what puzzled me, see. The Scintilla estimate published of nearly $1 billion. And then for each of the top fighter planes, the first one that they made, the first planes that they made, the first one that they made, they used 185,000 of them. So then they had American Bosch also making things. And from what I gather and what I can read, these were the numbers of magnitudes that they were using in those planes. I still think we made magnitudes for 90% of the planes that were used in World War II. Because I think they were used, I'm sure they were used interchangeably. The Army, Air Force, and the Navy, the military, would not permit only one supplier of the magnitude for military. So they had to be used interchangeably. Herman Haney said our products include 70 types of magnitudes. These were 70 different designs for aircraft, marine, ordnance, which is shooting stuff, tank, engines, automotive, industrial goods. So, and I believe that's true. But getting back to the numbers here, this only represents the first ones that were used in the first made plane. So where did the other ones go? I'll get back to that question. I'm sure they were stockpiled. Magnitudes are perishable machines. They're perishable. They wear. You have to take them out of a plane about every 100 hours and service them. You have to, the magnitudes tend to lose their hooking. The breakers mechanism gets worn. The impulse couplings get worn. Different parts of them get worn. They have to change. So that's quite a job to do. So I just think it's able to be that the military would take a magneto out of the plane and spend time fixing the magneto and putting it back in. They would take one out, put a new one in. What happened to the old one? Probably got dumped. So that's why I think there is a disparity in those numbers, a bid and against. Well, this was a B engine right here, and there's our magneto sitting right at that. Single magneto, one magneto, two ignitions. It made it lighter, made it easier to maintain. And there's I just want to show you this one. You'll see that. But there's a Bosch magneto right there. It's a single magneto. It was used in the 1830 engine on the B-24. And that was the tag that came on. We need. The S number indicates that it's for sale. And there is a cutaway in a museum of a B-24 Liberator engine with two Bosch magnetos. Right there. But I'm sure that I had read something that also that was ambiguous. It said that the Scintilla magnetos were also used. So they were used interchangeably, I'm sure. This is a tag off of the magneto that was used. It was a dual magneto that was used in the Enola Gay B-29 that dropped the atomic bombs. That magneto was used. But toward the end of World War II, our B-17s that were flying over Germany were intercepted suddenly by Messerschmitt 262, which was a jet, the first one. This is one of the first jets that were used in wartime flying, and it was a pilot that saw it in a B-17. Saw it pass at 600 miles an hour, and he said, "What the hell was that?" That was what he was for. So there we were, the beginning of the jet age. Now this is that P-47 there, I tell you. P-MET pursuit plane. They called it pursuit plane rather than fighter plane. This was, now we're beginning to get down to what it really was. It used this Pratt & Whitney engine. And this Pratt & Whitney engine, if you notice, it's got the magneto here, got two distributors, got a low tension, low voltage leads. With a low voltage magneto. And it said all of these cylinders, 18 cylinders, which each cylinder had two spark plugs. But at the end of the spark plug was an ignition coil, which boosted the voltage from low voltage that was coming out of the magneto to high voltage to get the spark that they needed. But that was connected to the spark plug in the cylinder by a connector. There was 36 of those connectors on this particular engine. And they weren't performing well. So a guy named Bill Uline, who worked for Mr. Springer, decided that they needed to change the insert that goes into the connector. These were the connectors. They were kind of like an AN connector. And we weren't making those connectors. Guess who was making them? Chicago. They had, now we're in the Connectors 101. The problem was this fellow right here. This fellow right here. They're made out of phenolic material, not rubber. It's a hard, thermostatic plastic material. And they were cracking, they were crumbling because of the heat and the vibration of the engine. So, Scintilla organized, made a connector with an insert that did not do that, out of do not rubber. Amphenol in Chicago at the time, and Canada, did not want to invest in molds and molding equipment to make unirubber inserts. So the village said, we're going to. So they did. They rallied the troops. They got the engineering department. They got the manufacturing department together. And before that, Snyder went, he was called to Detroit to justify that. And I guess the head of Amphenol at the time was there. And they flatly denied that they were going to. So he said, well, Snyder said he was going to. Detroit, well, wherever, I think it was said at the time, they were kind of against it. They didn't want to. But he did it anyway. So guys like the manufacturing group, Herman Winkler, and Bill Schmidt, Chet Blackman, my friend, they made the shells. Winkler, the engineering department was able to get the rubber and the unirubber, which was the synthetic rubber. That's what I was trying to think of before. Synthetic. And Winkler didn't know quite how to make the mold because he didn't know shrinkage here. So he had somebody make the mold and then try it out up in Troy somewhere. And they brought it back and we started making our own connectors. That was the beginning of the new connector product line. And there it is right there. This came out in 1947. That was the beginning of the connector. In 1950, Walter Spanker gave this chart. This was the segment of the total business that was connectors. All the rest of it was, including the jet packs and everything, was engine product. That was growing. Eventually, aircraft reciprocating engine diminished, dropped off. This one dropped off. So some of the industrial dropped off. This one started to build. Until 1957, Ralph Kimber talking to the National Club, and he said that we were the biggest connector supplier, the best connector supplier at that time in the world. But he also said that we had 17 different products that we were building in the plant, besides 16 besides electrical connectors. That's because after the war was over, there was no more magnesium. They had the engineering department was challenged to come up with new products, and they did. They gave up. And it was kind of like, that was Snyder's philosophy. Put 17 horses in a race on a track and see which one took out first. So we were like an engineering company, in my opinion. that, by the way, did manufacturing as well. And that's why we have stayed here to become established as we are. The connector business just flew. We went from the Armored AN, which is the Army Navy connector, which was a series similar to the ones I showed you, with the Sparkle, to Higby, which was a miniaturized version, and then to the sub-miniature, which was the JT, LJT, we called it, version. And because the military is constantly looking for lighter, smaller stuff for aircraft. This is an employee census for over the years, the best I could find. It went from 89, at the end of 246, of 1946, and they went Korean War, but they started in the connector business, and you can see how their role. And so in the 1950s, where it went up and went down. In 1962, it reached the peak of 5,700. It was a busy time. And this is, these are the 38999 military spec JT junior trilar shells. This is a jam shell, and what is the receptacle it has? But and here they are in an installation airplane, all laid up. You can see why they want to go to miniature. This is the biggest one we made. This was a 14-inch diameter stainless steel shell with a molybdenum steel insert on the inside. This was for the Polaris and Poseidon umbilical missile submarine. They've got one, I think, Chris has got one on a skid over. They're too big for me to carry. I think it'd be too big for us to see. There it is right there. It's over 90, the small kit is over 90 holes that had to be drilled, and one machine operation. And we never had a drill that could go through all 90 at the same time. It would inevitably break. We were able to extract the broken drill, continue on, and then leave the side. There's the quality department around 1963. There's a guy in here today, Ben Shaw. This Dodge Jones. This was a zero defects effort. This is quality department. This isn't even all shown here. But at some point, it was decided to separate. We had a lot of crowded floor space in the plant. We had, in the early 1970s, we had a vice president named Al Clark. He came in and he kind of admonished us because we had machines in there that were only used 2 days a week. So he called them lazy asses. So we had to go outside and do a lot of outside procurement to get rid of those machines. The old guard that was in there didn't want to let anything outside, didn't want to let any operation. They wanted full control of that because they didn't want to be hamstrung by outside vendors. But that turned around. But then the point of this is that he and the Bendix group decided to separate the engine products group from the connector group. At that time, the connectors had grown substantially, and we did not have enough law enforcement in that regard. So they moved the engine products to check. And this is what happened to the layout part. And I kind of use this as a number that, generally speaking, reduced the size of the machinery and opened up more space on the whole plant. We're reduced there by just about 30%. Then Delaney came, wanted to take it, he had sold the division, and he had a lot of extra cash. So he attempted a takeover of part that he had, and then they launched their own takeover of their vendors. United Technologies joined the fight, supporting part. As takeover bid, Bendix was rescued by Allied Corporation. So Allied Corporation ended up with Bendix in 1983. Later, in the 1980s, Allied merged our Bendix operation with the Amphenol Corporation. And, so that's how that happened. That's kind of a nutshell of what happened. Betty wrote a lot more about that than this. I could not put that all in one paper. That's basically what happened. So here's a little, just a little. I give you an idea of what the billing was in various years. 1944, during the war, they billed product at $8 million a year. In today's dollars, that would be 1.3 would be a billion, 1.3 billion. In 1950, it was down to 14 billion, the number of people that we had. In today's dollars, it would be 180 billion. 1975, we had a drop in employment, but that was because we had two recessions in the 1950s. And then in 1985, when I was in the layout department, I think we had 2,500 people. It was my estimate in the plant. That was about 100 billion a year that we had billed. And the reason I say that is we all got coffee cups for 10 million billion. They thought that was pretty great. Today it must be in the 30 billion. Sure. This was the one of the space station connectors I'm talking about. It's called the Zero G connector. This was a new innovation for us. You see there's a handle on the side of that, it's a lever. Normally when you connect a connector, you have to take a force to push. If you were doing that outside of a space capsule, out in where zero gravity, the force of pushing it like that would also propel you back. So the design was made to put a lever on the side of it so that an astronaut could squeeze it with his hand like that to engage blood to the receptacle. This is a small one. The ones that we really had fun with were the ones that were this long that went through the bulkhead of the International Space Station. And we're about 2 or 3 inches in diameter. Very heavy. The other thing about this is that all of the corners on this were dimensioned to be machined. They had to machine them 30,000 radius, plus or minus 5, something like that. We never had to do that before. We usually broke the corners of the machining operation with various tools, or we tumbled them to get round corners, to get the birds up. But the astronauts were the ones that didn't show. They said, this is what you got to do. You've got to make all of those corners absolutely 30,000 diameter. But we were able to do that because we had CNC machines and we had guys that could profile it very easily. We designed some tools that they could cut those like that. Otherwise, I think we've played with stuff. All those corner radiuses were machined. The reason we had to do that is because if they tore their gloves on it when they were outside of the space, yeah, it would be hurts for them. So that was very unique. This is Ted Wilco and his wife, and Jim Hamp and Florence Hamp. Florence Hamp was one of the longtime secretary for maybe Don Jones, Don Quinney, and Don Moore. And Jim was a supervisor in the planning department, and he had been a B-17 pilot during the war, so we had a B-17 fly into Sydney about 2009. I got to go with it. I got a picture of it. It was a great picture. And then there was a bad day. Very, very bad. The water was 4 or 5 feet. Everything 4 or 5 feet in the building was practically destroyed. A lot of records. That was Rick Aiken. He was the general manager at the time. He lived on Camp Street. And I was down there with him. And he had a coffee cup on the edge of the water. And he was trying to determine the water was going up or down. So, very unfortunate. So, that about concludes my presentation. And there we are, back home. The lady that's not there anymore. So thank you all.